Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
In the midst of the horrors of war, there are some places that just never recover. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And you know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because let's face it, you're listening right now. And if you are listening, please keep listening. Subscribe, hit that subscribe button, gives you a 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere, places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So you can give us a like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. In all those spots. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, Letterboxd, the TikTok, the Threads, the Blue Sky. I lose track. But we're at In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? If we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it that much more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please do us that kindness. Come on by and pay us a visit. On this episode, we're dealing with a tough one. It is a brand new documentary. It's on video on demand platforms now. It's called In the Shadow of Beirut, and it's the portrait of a modern day Lebanon as seen through the eyes of 4 families living in the impoverished Sabra and Shatila neighborhoods of the city, which was the scene of an infamous massacre and so much horrible violence. It's from directors Garry Keane and Gerard Kelly, and it really is it's one of those ones where it's harrowing, but it's beautiful. It's depressing, but you kind of need to see it anyway because there's a little bit of positivity there as well. It's really a unique mix of a film, and I mean, I absolutely loved watching it, and we had a unique pleasure of sitting down with Garry and Stephen to talk about making a film like this, because again, it makes you appreciate the need that we all need to hold on to keep hoping for better days and keep hoping for things to get better and that things will get better. And it's such a unique tapestry of hope that is one of those lessons that if people who, you know, have been bombed literally out of their homes and are living in squalor and disaster zones can still maintain a certain degree of optimism for that better tomorrow, then why can't we? It's an important film to watch, and I do highly recommend it. It's on video on demand platforms now, In the Shadow of Beirut. But first, please enjoy our talk with its directors, Garry Keane and Gerard Kelly, because between you and me, it was a darn good one. All right. Well, I mean, first off, Stephen, Garry, just thank you so much for the time today, and just congratulations on the work. It's a hell of a film. It really is.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
No, I mean, I guess the first question is, and I mean, I think this is the thing that stuck with me. And I mean, I'll admit to this, just as a viewer of documentary and film in general, be like, oh, it's another one about, it's another documentary about that part of the world and that kind of thing. Like, you can get a little numb to it. But I really appreciated that this was about the people in it and with their universe really kind of falling apart around them. Like, I'm kind of curious, when you both went into this project, what was sort of the initial impetus? Like, what was sort of the kicking off point to not just tell the story, but tell it in this particular way with these subjects that you found?
Sure. I mean, Garry, I might just start off that,
Yeah,
and
no, I'll
then
go for it.
I'll let you take over. David, it was very much an organic, non-filmmaking approach from my side as a director of photography, but but coming from the commercial world, like the advertising and being a photographer, I'd never made a film before. So I just started off wanting to learn a language, and through a friendship of somebody from a family in Shatila, I sort of got brought into that world very um, humanly. And I, 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 I set about just learning as to why people in that part of Beirut had to live very different lives to other parts. And when you go into it was it was sort of from a historical living history perspective that you would hear about the Civil War, the Lebanese Civil War from people who had lived it. You would hear about the Syrian Civil War from people who fled it in real time. And then as I started to audio record stories, as I started to take out the camera after a few years of finally getting a command of Arabic where I could understand and communicate and ask and listen, I began to accumulate still photography, audio, then video, and sort of after a few years reached a point where I'd watched Garry Keane and a film that he co-directed, which was at Sundance called Gaza. I watched that, and then with the Irish connection, I reached out to him and said, Garry, just saw Gaza, loved it. Hats off to you. I'm Stephen, and this is what I've been up to. And Garry took a look at the footage and then gave me some really good advice. Didn't look for anything in return, and then I went off again, and then returned to Garry 6 months or a year after that, where we talked again, and it was another good call. And then we spoke to Brendan Byrne and lined ourselves up, and then went and um, approached Lebanese producers and production companies, and then got it going. Then as a film, while
Yeah.
up until till then, I think it was more of a yearning to try and to understand and to document and to 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 witness incredible heroes living out daily like just such struggles and such fights, and how love still shone through. I really wanted to honor people who had become friends. And then that's where Garry came in and sort of from that footage identified where the strong narrative threads were and where the gaps were. And then we he came to Beirut a few times, and we filmed together there with the families in their homes, which of course I'd been in for years, but Garry hadn't been, and they took to him like they took to me, extremely welcoming. Yeah, would give you the shirt off their back without even asking. Um, some of them don't have a proverbial shirt, but yeah. So it sort of came about from people, friendships, and then got a filmmaking stamp and shape put on it by skilled people with a lot of experience, certainly more than I had at that time. Um, yeah, and I'm forever grateful to them.
Garry, would you echo that sentiment?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting process, and it's a very unique process to approach it from my point of view as a filmmaker for 30 years. It's normally the processes that I'd be at the very start of a film, planning and scripting it, then shooting it, and then editing. Go through enough A to Z of the process, but to come in at a point where someone has shot so much footage, um, that you have to. Your starting point is a very different starting point. Your starting point is getting stuck into the footage that they have filmed and trying to see what the value of that is, and where the value lies in that. And very quickly into watching Stephen's footage, I realized that there was huge value in it. Obviously there was issues with it in terms of joining up the dots sometimes, because when you're in that mode of filming all the time, and you're not an experienced filmmaker, you film, and he did a remarkable job of that. But then the next task was to try and turn it into a film, and join all that. So that's why I ended up going back with Stephen, just to fill in the gaps after we did assemblies and after we picked our characters that we felt were the lead characters, and picked the storylines, most of which were obvious enough that were the lead storylines we're going to take, and then we had to go back and just figure out how to put it all together and how to stitch it all together. So it's a very unique and very interesting process, and it's fraught with potential landmines and difficulties, probably more so on the relationship side. So it has to work, and it worked between myself and Stephen. Thankfully, we didn't kill each other. We got on well. We filmed well together, even though my technique of filming would be vastly different to his. So the poor people in Lebanon had a bit of a shock when I landed with a different sort of head on me than Stephen would have had. But it all worked, and as Stephen said, they were very gracious and very welcoming, and opened their doors and opened their hearts and opened their cupboards, even though they had nothing for us. And I fell in love with them immediately, and hopefully they with me in return, because I felt it anyway. I felt the love in abundance there. So it was a fantastic experience, a unique one. As I said, it was so creative and so involved and so thoroughly enjoyable, hard as hell, but really thoroughly enjoyable from start to finish. And at the end of the day, it was the people that made it, and that's why the people are in the very, very forefront of everything that is this film. It is about the people. It is about them, with them, for them, in their houses, in their lives, in close-up intimacy, and that's the absolute joy that is to be had from a process like this, where I got to go into that world that Stephen had inhabited for so long, and really feel at home in it from day one, and really feel part of it, from day one. And that was hugely you know enjoyable, scary at times, not in a literal sense all of the time, even though there was that element there, and Stephen had to keep me safe, from all the elements that threatened us, in those places. But at the same time, I never felt anything but comfortable. I never felt anything but at home. I never felt anything but you know, very humbled and very gracious for the opportunity to be allowed into these people's lives and to be able to document their lives and tell their stories. So, incredibly fulfilling the whole experience from start to finish, really.
Is the magic of something like this, just because I mean, I got to reference something you just said before about just shooting, keeping the camera going, because there are some genuinely gorgeous moments in this film, not just visually, but I mean with your subjects as well. And I can imagine you're not necessarily in an environment where you can sort of manufacture it or steer it or do it. It just kind of has to happen. When you're shooting in a place like this, how vital is just sort of the art of making sure your camera is always on?
Stephen, you did most of that end of the filming,
Yeah,
because they,
yeah,
they very
you're
they very much knew when I was there that the camera was on, because obviously, we had only a
yeah.
very limited time to do it, and we had so much work to do. But just before you tell your bit
Mm.
of the story, which is more important than what I have to say, what I did see in Stephen's footage from the minute I started looking at it, was that intimacy, was that absolutely undeniable and very obvious, thing that was happening in the room when Stephen decided to take out the camera. And he'll tell you himself he didn't take it out that often, and I think, his footage benefited from that, approach as well. But you could see that they were incredibly comfortable with Stephen. You could see that he was absolutely a friend before he was a filmmaker. He was, he was their absolute housemate before he was, their documentarian. He was their, friend and accomplice in all things in life and language, long before it ever really got to the point where he was embarking on filming her, asked her permission to take out the camera. So it was seamless, and and that only happens, for two main reasons. It only happens through absolute trust and time. And Stephen afforded himself the time, and he got the trust, and that's where those intimate, invisible camera moments, invisible in the room camera moments occurred, and they're gems when they happen. But it takes a long time. Those things, you don't walk into someone's house and turn on the camera and get that reaction. It takes a long, long time, and I think good documentaries are time, effort, and trust. All of those things put together formulate the better ones, and it so was because of the efforts put in by Stephen.
You kind of answered. You kind of answered that, Gary. I mean, the the camera being invisible, people always know when the camera comes out, you know? I mean, can it ever really be fully invisible? But there was immense, agency over when the camera was out or not, or turned on or not. Like some days I'd be there, some weeks I'd be there, and I'd barely take out the camera once. Not because I didn't see anything, maybe it was because I didn't feel anything. Like I'd, tough time. Like you sort of step past the I'm a human first, so like
Yeah.
you get involved when stuff is going on, like, and if people are going through it, like I'm not I'm I'm there as a person first rather than a rather than a filmmaker. So like the camera really was only on a tiny percentage of the time that it was there, like less than 5% easily. Um, most 95% of the time I was there living with people, being present and listening and learning so much, um, that if the camera was turned on certain times and somebody was in an argument and didn't want the camera on, they would say to me, Steve, camera off, camera away, we're going into something here. And I go, sure, put it away. And sometimes conversely, they would ask me, Steve, take your camera out now, film this. I go like, I'm not feeling it. And I go like, no, film it. And sometimes I'd say, no, I
Yeah.
won't, because ethically, emotionally, whatever, no. And sometimes like it would work both ways. Somebody would say to me, take out the camera, and I go, okay, yeah, I'll film. Or I'd ask somebody here, can I film this? And I'd say, sure, of course you can. More. Like I remember Rabia saying to me, Steve, you know more about our family than we do ourselves, because you're here. And we all open up to you. You're not coming in with the history, and that helped
Guys, I'm on an
in
interview in LA, so quiet.
that helped with the very sectarian society that Lebanon is
You take the ones at the back, I'll
living
take
under
these
now
six
at the
ones.
moment. Gary, you're talking there. We can hear you. Given the sectarian nature of Lebanon, that in Beirut people peg you immediately, given how you talk, your surname, how you look, and they can immediately place you. Okay, well, you're part of this group. While me, one of the luxuries I had in moving around there was that I could easily go from one section to another of Sabra or Shatila, because I wasn't part of one particular sect or group. Of course, I was foreign, like, are you Christian? What are you? Hard to place, but I didn't have that sort of that category put on me. And it meant that when people would warn me with the best of intentions, Steve, don't go in there. We saw you go in there before, don't go in there. But knowing very well that when I would go into a certain street or area, that my back and people, not just the family, but the people in that section knew who I was, looked after me, and trusted me. So I think that looping that back around to, getting those intimate moments, it's trust. And that trust comes with time and with empathy, and with not judging people.
Well, I mean, Steve and Gary, just you know what? It's amazing because this is such a beautiful and really human story, which I think is so important. And I can't wait for more people to see it because just even for you guys to sort of resist that flight or flight mentality and sort of be there in the moment with these people who you've developed these relationships with is just so vital and so important, and really the magic of the film. I just got to thank you both for the work and for the time today.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. Thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely.
David, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us, and really
Likewise.
cool
All right. Bye,
questions.
guys.
And yeah, good.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental,
or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.